The U.S. Congress starts its debate over the Iran nuclear deal, while in a speech, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says Israel will cease to exist within the next 25 years. With Hungary expecting another 40,000 migrants to arrive this week, EU Commission chief unveils a plan to force the bloc to share the distribution of 160,000 refugees. After 63 years and 7 months, calculated as 23,226 days, Britain's Queen Elizabeth II becomes the longest reigning monarch of the United Kingdom.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the news today. As Congress begins debating the Iran nuclear deal, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton weighed in on it today and somewhat distanced herself from U.S. President Barack Obama. Meanwhile, in Iran, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei had some statements of his own, including on negotiating with the U.S. and eliminating Israel. Shai Ben-Ari has the story.
You remember President Reagan's line about the Soviets, trust but verify. My approach will be distrust and verify.
That was the figure of speech used by Hillary Clinton Wednesday as she addressed the Iran deal at length for the first time since announcing her candidacy for U.S. president. While Clinton openly supports the deal, it is a problematic issue for her. The Iran deal is unpopular with large parts of the American public, including Jewish voters in swing states, such as Florida. Therefore, Clinton is eager to set herself apart from President Barack Obama, who many feel is banking on a partnership with the Iranian reformist camp.
This is not the start of some larger diplomatic opening, and we shouldn't expect that this deal will lead to broader changes in their behavior. I believe this deal and a joint strategy for enforcing it makes Israel safer. I say that with humility. I'm not Israeli. I don't know what it's like to live under constant threat from your neighbors in a country where the margin for error is so thin.
Many have criticized the Iran deal for not addressing the Islamic Republic's ongoing support for international terrorism and its threats against other countries in the region. These comments were made Wednesday morning by Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei.
Some of the Zionists have said that given the results of the nuclear negotiations, they have been relieved of concerns about Iran for 25 years. But we tell them that basically, you will not see the next 25 years, and with God's grace, nothing under the name of the Zionist regime will exist in the region by then.
I'll increase support for Israeli rocket and missile defenses and for intelligence sharing.
Clinton also noted she plans similar support for U.S. partners among the Arab Sunni states. But all this has in fact already been offered by the Obama administration. Clinton also noted what she plans to do beyond that which has already been proposed by the White House.
I'll crack down on the shipment of weapons to Hamas and push Turkey and Qatar to end their financial support. It's time to eliminate the false distinction that some still make between the supposed political and military wings. If you're part of Hezbollah, you're part of a terrorist organization, plain and simple.
Meanwhile, the administration has managed to rack up the support of 42 U.S. senators for the nuclear deal with Iran, one more than required for a Senate filibuster. The Republicans are still planning to exercise maximum pressure on the Democrats. There is even talk of scheduling the vote for September 11th, adding some symbolic historical significance that won't make things easier for deal supporters. President Obama wishes to avoid using his veto powers to protect what he sees as his major foreign policy achievement so far. Some, however, see it as anything but.
Yes, and with me right now here in the studio is Iranian politics analyst Meir Javed Anfar. We haven't seen you for a long time.
Great to be back, Lucy.
Great to see you again. And also Danny Ayalon, former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister and former Ambassador to the United States. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
Before I will start with you, I want to ask you, Ambassador Ayalon, it seems that just hearing Hillary Clinton, Correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that she's running for the presidency of the Israeli state and not the United States?
Well, Lucy, she is on a defense. She sees the polls, she sees that she's sliding in the polls, and I think what bothers her most is the intent of Biden to run. I think what we see now, distancing herself from Obama, is also to signal to the White House, I know you're supporting Obama, because Biden wouldn't run without, the nod from Obama. So she is really under stress from both sides, from the field and also from the top. So she has a real challenge now.
You know, if we're looking right now, let's take it one step at a time. Ayatollah Khamenei is saying what he's saying, so maybe I can understand why Hillary is saying, I need to stop now, I need to think, and if I want to be the president of the United States, when he's saying something like that, maybe I need to reconsider my whole approach.
Not just, it's a very important in terms of narrative when the strongest man in Iran comes and says the state of Israel will not, please God, will not exist in 25 years. It doesn't leave a lot of choice for U.S. presidential candidates. It doesn't matter who you are. And I think what should worry the Iranian moderates in Iran is that, they're trying to get investors into Iran. They're trying to open up, desperately trying to get jobs. But now, some states in the United States are passing their own divestment resolutions, saying to any company that invests in Iran that they will not do business with it. I think this is just going to strengthen the hands of those people who still want to pressure Iran. But, what he said today, I think he gave us a little sneak peek inside what's being said within the regime. You're
basically saying that what Ambassador Ayalon said about Hillary Clinton, that she is under pressure, that she's under attack. Also, Ayatollah Khamenei is under attack.
The fact that he said today for 25 years, that he quoted some Israelis saying for the next 25 years, Iran will not be a threat. Well, it goes to show that he's had to make a compromise, as part of which for the next 25 years the Iranian regime cannot use the nuclear program to threaten the state of Israel, which is why he said that the Israelis should not think that we're not going to challenge, they're not going to be challenged by other groups in the region. The Iranian regime has realized that for the next 25 years it cannot use this nuclear program to threaten us anymore. He's under pressure. He wants to basically satisfy the right-wing flank in his own government, in his own regime, but at the same time in order to challenge the state of Israel, because he's worried that Israel may think that he's weak now.
You mentioned Biden, and you're saying that basically Obama, or you're saying that, that it seems that the Democrats are maybe going towards Biden than towards Hillary. What is this? What is happening here? Why Barack Obama wants to leave Biden there and not Hillary Clinton? He wants to make sure that the Iran deal will continue living after he will be long gone?
Well, two things. First of all, I believe that there's still some residues and bad sentiments from the 2008 campaign when he ran against Hillary. Oh. And secondly, I think that he believes that Biden would keep his legacy much better than Hillary. Hillary is very independent. Hillary comes with Bill Clinton, and they would try to maybe change many things that they didn't like about Obama. Biden would be a continuation. If Biden wins, even the primaries, this is a victory not just to Obama, to the Obama legacy and to Obama's policy.
What is the stand of Bernie Sanders?
That's interesting. Right now, he's really rising in the polls, and it seems like a three-way race if Biden decides. By the way, Biden is also playing very coy right now, kind of push me. He wants to be, he said, because of his loss, he lost his son last year. So the family decision has to be made, and he's considering it and taking his time. During this time, there is a big build-up. So when he says yes, I think he will have a big jump. But right now, I couldn't bet who would take the primaries in the Democrats.
The Iranians are looking right now at the race to the White House and saying to themselves, what? We need to secure our stand to make sure that this deal will actually live, or we need to make some plans in case that this deal won't live after Barack Obama.
Well, the only thing I can see from the government rather than the regime, and I'm talking about Mr. Rouhani and his government, is that one of the arguments that they've been able to use is that Obama is the best chance that we have in order to reach an agreement with the United States and to save Iran's economy. So I think what they're interested in right now is to make sure that this thing gets passed, that the nuclear agreement gets passed within the Senate, the Congress in the United States, and that it's implemented, and that's it. And once that is out the door, that's the first priority. The second priority, what they're hoping for, is that there'll not be a Republican president, especially someone like Donald Trump.
You know, I want to take this back to Israel, seeing what is happening right now, hearing what Ayatollah Khamenei is saying, watching aside and looking how the deal is actually passing in the Congress. Who are the allies that Israel can actually trust in the region if it can't trust anyone right now in the region? And if Israel did her own plan, if something will happen?
I would say at the end of the day, it would be the moderate Sunni countries. I think we should learn a chapter from the book of King Salman. The Saudis have the best diplomacy. You know, they're against the deal, but they're not saying it out loud. They're saying it in closed rooms, and they get what they want from Obama, like in the meeting between King Salman in Washington with Obama. But having said that, it doesn't mean that, again, if push comes to shove, and if there is an overfly, if there is some coordination, I wouldn't be surprised that the Saudis will turn their eyes away if you would see Israeli planes flying over.
Exactly, because can you really trust someone who, at the end of the day, said yes to the United States and told them, you know what, we will go through with this deal?
Well, this is diplomacy 101. And, you know, you say one thing, you do some other things. The secret is not to get caught.
Well, no, and never to say no.
And never to say no.
And
exactly.
As you're saying, the jets will just pass and no one will see. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for this. Thank you. In the latest setback for President Bashar al-Assad, Al-Qaeda's Syrian affiliate and its allies seized the last regime-held military base in Idlib province. This comes as U.S. officials confirmed that Russia has sent additional aircraft to Syria in the past day and has deployed a small number of naval forces. Charles Bublizer has more.
The Syrian regime's last stronghold in Idlib province has fallen to a coalition of Islamists, which includes the al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front. The Abu Dukhur airbase was taken by the rebels after a siege that lasted for nearly 2 years. The group of militants, which has dubbed itself the Army of Conquest, now controls most of northwestern Idlib, except for 2 predominantly Shia villages held by pro-government militia. But the setback for President Bashar Assad may not be long-lived, as reinforcements in the form of Russian troops are making their way into Syria. A regime official confirmed Wednesday that Russia has upped its military presence in the country, as Moscow appears to be doubling down on its support for Assad. According to media reports, both Iran and Greece approved Russian requests to use their airspace for flights to Syria, covering the period ending September 24th. Meanwhile, Australia became the latest country to enter the Syrian foray, with Prime Minister Tony Abbott announcing Canberra would extend its airstrikes against Islamic State militants in Iraq into neighboring Syria.
And with me right now here in the studio, Senior Middle East Analyst Ali Wakat. Good evening.
Good evening.
We are watching what is happening in Syria, and, you know, it seems that Russia has its own, let's say, targets in being more involved in this. Watching what is happening in the last 24 hours, what is the next step for Russia?
First of all, what happened in the last 24 hours is not so dramatic, because the province of Idlib was almost evacuated from the regime since March, Lucy, and this was the last point of the regime in this province. And I think that President Assad admitted a couple of weeks ago in an interview that he is short with manpower and with soldiers, and that the Syrian army prefer to concentrate its effort on what he defines as the strategic strategic places and access. This is why it is not so dramatic, and we cannot say that for the moment the Russian involvement has no impact over the situation in Syria, because it is very early to judge whether the Russians will have their impact or no. But I do agree with you that in the last weeks there is a very important evolution. On one hand, the Russians are directly involved. Russia, beyond the experts and beyond the some units that are involved on the ground, is turning the Syrian coast into a base in the into their main base in the Middle East. It's not new, but it is now strengthened very significantly. Tartus and Latakia are becoming the Middle East bases of the Russian Empire of Vladimir Putin. This is why, for the first time, we can say that Israel might feel, I don't want to say threatened by, but significantly bothered by the Russian role in Syria. But on the other hand, the Saudis, the Qataris, and the Turks are are investing in uniting the opposition. Officially, the coalition that liberated the airbase in Abu Dhuhr in Idlib today was the Army of the Reconquest, which is a coalition of Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra Front, and other militia supported by Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia.
You know, if we are trying to look at the entire picture, and we are seeing, of course, the problem of the migrants in Europe and what is happening with the Syrian migrants in Europe, and we are understanding that the course of the problem is basically the war in Syria. Russia is trying to be right now in front of the West, what? Part of the solution in this specific issue, and by that gaining also more control in Syria. And at the end of this process, what will happen?
Since we are not anticipating a solution, so we cannot say that Russia is part of the solution. For the moment, Russia is part of the problem, because the problem seems to be still very complicated, and it will take time to solve it. But no doubt, the Russians feel that there might be a breakthrough in the situation in Syria, and there is a big interest of Russia to be on the ground. We are talking about a region. Syria, in our conscience, is only the place of war, but Syria is also a place of gas, full of gas, and the Russians want to be there when the superpowers will start divide between them the resources of Syria. And if they can back and guarantee that Bashar Assad will be part of any arrangement in the future, at least in this region where they are located, the Alawite region of Latakia and Tartus, and maybe parts of Damascus, because it's not a secret that the scenario of dividing Syria is on the table, Lucy.
Definitely. Ali Waqid, thank you very much for this. And in Egypt, the Israeli embassy in Cairo reopened today 4 years after angry crowds stormed in and demanded that the staff will be expelled. An Israeli foreign ministry delegation arrived in Cairo to mark the occasion. Israel's top representatives, the ministry director Dori Gold, said that the two countries will continue to work to achieve stability and prosperity in the region. European Commissioner President Jean-Claude Juncker has announced plans to combat Europe's worst migrant crisis since World War II. Under the proposal, 120,000 asylum seekers will be distributed among EU member countries. Hungary has been warned it should expect an additional 40,000 migrants by the end of this week, and as it has become a key point on the journey north for the migrants.
We are not talking about 40,000, we are not talking about 120,000, it's 160,000. That's the number Europeans have to take in charge and have to take in their arms. And I really hope that this time everyone will be on board. No poems, no rhetorics. Action is what is needed for the time being.
Action is what is needed, and correspondent Merav Savir is in Vienna. Merav, good evening. So can you see any action on the ground in Vienna?
Well, Lucy, if you can tell behind me, the train stations are still packed with people coming in and out of Vienna. Some of them wanting to stay here. For the most part, they're trying to get to Germany, a place where that's taking them, even if they have been fingerprinted in other countries. And you mentioned Hungary and the idea that they will have to take in another significant number of migrants. And I do want to turn the attention to that because some of the migrants and refugees that we spoke with earlier today told us that they're scared of Hungary because of what had happened to them on their journey to get here, saying that authorities there and security they were putting them in camps that were more like prison than anything else. If they wanted to go to the bathroom, they had to ask for permission. If they wanted to smoke, they had to ask for permission, and most of the time we're told no. They told me that they didn't have blankets or jackets to wear at night when temperatures are dropping, and they asked for just a couple minutes to sit in a police vehicle to warm up, and they were told no, you sit on the ground. They're trying to deliberately shame them and humiliate them, and that is just one of the stories that we heard, some of them telling us they were actually put in a prison. Now, some of them that are getting here do want to stay in Austria. It is rare, but we took a trip 30 kilometers outside of Vienna to talk to some who did want to stay here, telling us that this is the place that they researched before it's met their expectations. And I do want to turn the fact that, and this is what we saw today. More waves of migrants and refugees continue arriving in Vienna on Wednesday. Doram Hakib just got off the train from Hungary, a country he now fears.
People protested because of the bad conditions, and all the tents were burned. People ran. The security took the people who fled, some to jails. After they took the 50 people that were left to jail, there was no health service, no food. There were 9 people in one room that had only enough space for 4 people to stand.
Fearing Hungarian authorities is now common. Hussein, a refugee from Damascus, Syria, told us the camps were like prison. He asked us not to film him because he's afraid of all the governments. He's traveling with his wife and 4 children, and on Wednesday they got to play with a dog for the first time. Hussein and Hakib don't plan on staying in Austria. They want to continue to Germany, Belgium, and France. A small number of refugees and migrants do decide to stay in Austria. They are brought to different refugee camps. The largest one, Treiskirchen, is about 30 kilometers from Vienna and is now home to 3,800 people. Refugees living here say the conditions aren't great.
There are bad conditions and there are good conditions. But in general, it's not good because it is a camp. Because the camp can give you more than what it has.
When refugees first arrive in Austria and request asylum, they receive these green cards. When they've been approved for the process to begin, they get this white one. When they receive the card, the regional government is supposed to find accommodations for them. But with such a large number of refugees, they don't have enough housing.
Yes, all eyes have been, for the most part, turned to Europe to its struggle to deal with the influx of migrants and refugees and to formulate a clear policy for the future. But where are the wealthy Gulf Cooperation Council countries in the picture? And why haven't they taken any refugees? Mohammed Al-Qasim reports.
Thousands of Syrian refugees are flooding Europe, fleeing their war-torn country. But the 6 wealthy Gulf Cooperation Council countries have officially resettled none of them. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates have made generous financial contributions to Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan for resettling over 4 million refugees. Saudi Arabia has allowed 500,000 Syrians in since 2011. Primarily as migrant workers, and none with refugee status. But John Dalhusen of Amnesty International called the Gulf Arab states' behavior shameful and criticized JCC members for officially taking in 0 refugees.
The failure of neighboring countries in the Gulf region, Gulf states, to also contribute to taking in their fair share of a global refugee population, and a Syrian one in particular, is no less shameful than the response we're seeing in Europe.
Germany announced it will take in 2.5 million Syrian refugees in the next 5 years. France said it will allow 24,000 in the next 2 years, while Britain said it will take in 20,000 over 5 years.
We share a concern.
The United States, for its part, has been harshly criticized. By the end of this year, the U.S. will have taken in just 1,400 Syrian refugees since 2011. So why haven't GCC countries stepped up? Fahd al-Shulaimi, a Kuwaiti political analyst and the head of the Gulf Security and Peace Forum, has said Syrian refugees have psychological problems, adding that the cost of living in the Gulf countries is very high and not suitable for them. Others have expressed their fear of any change in the demographic fabric of their countries if the borders are opened. While money from Gulf countries have been the lifeline of the armed Syrian opposition, the debate over who should be at the forefront of receiving refugees is heating up.
And with me to understand a little bit more about what is happening with the Arab countries and with the Arab leaders, correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim. Good evening.
Good evening.
You know, in the name of God, where are the Arab leaders? Where are the Muslim leadership to actually save these people instead of going to other cultures to actually take them in and give them better future with all the money that they have?
Well, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey has taken their share of refugees, more than 4 million so far. The Gulf countries, right now, they say we are willing to contribute money, financial help to the refugees, but we are not going to take any in. Now, to be fair, Saudi Arabia has taken in 500,000 Syrians since 2011, but they've given them migrant status, migrant visas, which means at some point these visas will expire and they have to leave. In the United Arab Emirates also, the government there has given up to 100,000 Syrians migrant visas, and they are allowing them to stay. But they're not refugees. They're not being given refugee status, which means they will not enjoy the residency of these countries for as long as they are, refugees. On the other hand, another country to be blamed is the United States. America has only taken in, since 2011 up to the end of this year, 1,400 Syrians, refugees.
1,400?
1,400, that's for another 3 months will be 1,400. Up to this point, less than that. However, because of the harsh criticism and the pressure from the international community, as well as from within, John Kerry came out today and he said that we will study and look at ways and venues to take in more. Some Americans come out yesterday and they said that the U.S. can take up to 100,000 refugees, Syrian refugees, at least.
But this, if we're talking about the geographical, let's say, distance between Syria and the United States, maybe it is rational that the United States is not accepting this amount of refugees until now.
Well, one of the main reasons to why the U.S. isn't taking that many refugees, not only Syrian refugees, but Iraqi refugees before and Somali refugees before, is the U.S. puts too much emphasis on their security background, and it does a great deal of in-depth security check on its refugees.
11 is just around the corner.
2 days.
Yes. Mohammed Al-Qasim, thank you very, very much for this. And we're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and then I'll be back for the second part of the news today. Don't go away. The U.S. Congress starts its debate over the Iran nuclear deal, while in a speech, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says Israel will cease to exist within the next 25 years. With Hungary expecting another 40,000 migrants to arrive this week, EU Commission Chief Jean-Claude Juncker unveils a plan to force the bloc to share the distribution of 160,000 refugees. And after 63 years and 7 months, calculated as 23,226 days, Britain's Queen Elizabeth II becomes the longest reigning monarch of the United Kingdom. Welcome back to the news today. Ahead of a visit by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli demonstrators clashed outside British Prime Minister David Cameron's London residence, with some calling for the arrest of Netanyahu. Prior to flying to London, the Premier met with European Council President Donald Tusk, where he urged Europe to see Israel as a partner in confronting extremist Islam rather than criticizing it for its policy towards the Palestinians. The Israeli leader called on Europe to stand with Jerusalem in fighting surging extremist Islam.
Europe should support Israel, not pressure Israel, not attack Israel, but support Israel, which is the only real shield that Europe and the Middle East have against extremist Islam, which is on the rise. We are ready to work together with Europe, Africa, and other places in order to fight extremist Islam. But this necessitates a change in attitude. And this change will take time, but we will bring it about. This will be one of the focus points of my conversations with David Cameron. The second thing is that we should fight extremist Islam, not just on our borders, as we are doing, but also within our territory. The moment I return, I will hold a meeting to summarize the meeting I already held about building up forces, about stepping up enforcement, about minimum penalties, about blowing up the homes of suicide terrorists, about other steps we intend to take against anyone who tries to strike at us here inside the country. My policy is zero tolerance for terrorism.
And with me right now is London correspondent Jonathan Sashadoti. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening.
Really, Jonathan, seeing all these protests, nobody really expected that the visit of Benjamin Netanyahu will be, let's say, long live the Queen.
Well, there are always those who will turn out on the streets to protest against Israel. Such is the subject of Israel and the Palestinian conflict in Europe. However, it's not necessarily the case that those people are typical of the average Briton. Most British people probably don't have terribly strong opinions one way or the other. But what we saw today outside Downing Street were two protests, one in favor of Mr. Netanyahu's visit and one against it, which is becoming a recurring theme whenever there's a visiting Israeli dignitary of any sort, and that was the case today.
You know, Jonathan, I really wonder, with Europe right now dealing with all the migrant crisis, really, Israel is in the top priority right now?
Absolutely. You could ask that question. And the surprising thing today was with the constant talk from the government and David Cameron about dealing with homegrown extremism that leads to violent extremism and terrorism, we saw outside Downing Street people proudly waving Hezbollah flags, which technically is apparently illegal under the law, under Section 13(1)(b) of the Terrorism Act. The Home Office has said that it believes the flying of terrorist flags should be illegal, and yet the reports are that there were no arrests by the many police who were present for those people. There were 1 or 2 arrests that were reported for people who were shouting anti-Semitic slogans among the crowd of people protesting against Mr. Netanyahu's visit. But again, this is crossing over into the very grey area that British Jewish people and British people of all faiths and hues are worried about, which is where opposition to Israel becomes so extreme that there are people within the ranks of protesters against Israel who verge into anti-Semitism.
You know, we're always talking about maybe Benjamin Netanyahu talking about issues that the states that he's talking to already well known with. Like, for example, the United States, he's always talking about Iran and how dangerous Iran is and how dangerous the deal with Iran is. And when he is going to Europe, talking about extreme Islam and terror. Really, London, Britain, Europe doesn't know anything about it, that it needs Benjamin Netanyahu to come and enlighten it?
Well, Britain is in fact learning from the Middle East. We saw this week the announcement from David Cameron that for the first time Britain had an RAF drone strike in Syria, which took out a British-born jihadist terrorist, 2 of them, in fact. This is something which is causing some controversy among some quarters here in Great Britain, because people are asking if this is legal, if this is proportional, if this is the right thing to do. These are problems that Israel has been dealing with for many years. So the issue of extremist Islamist terror within Britain and affecting Britain is, of course, newer here than it is in Israel. Some would argue that Britain should have been watching far more closely, as Israel has been dealing with this for years. And that's why Mr. Cameron is probably behind closed doors, likely to be taking Mr. Netanyahu's advice very seriously.
Yes, Jonathan, you stay with me because except the protest that we saw today, Britain was also celebrating. And I want you to stay just for that because this day marks history for the British monarchy as Queen Elizabeth II, who ascended the throne at the age of 25, becomes Britain's longest reigning monarch. At the age of 89, she is also the nation's oldest ever monarch, and tonight will surpass the 63 years, 7 months, 2 days, 16 hours, and 23 minutes that her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, spent on the throne. Ayman Siksik has more.
I think it's a symbol for the whole monarchy. I think it's amazing.
It's a wonderful record, you know, wonderful record of service and continuity, and you know, it's a happy day for us all, I suppose.
The British capital is abuzz with an 89-year-old star. Queen Elizabeth II is on the cover of every major British publication on Wednesday as she surpasses Queen Victoria to become Britain's longest-reigning monarch. After 63 years in office, Queen Elizabeth II has completed quite a journey. On February 6, 1952, a 25-year-old Elizabeth assumed power as her country was struggling to overcome World War II. Count 23,226 days later, and Britain has overcome the Second World War, and Elizabeth II is still in power. British prime ministers seem interchangeable in the 6 decades that went by since she took office, but for the government currently in place in the country, this is a source of pride.
In 63 years and 216 days, she's worked with 12 prime ministers, 6 archbishops of Canterbury, 9 cabinet secretaries. The Queen is our Queen, and we could not be more proud of her.
Her life has been a great sweep of British history: the Second World War, the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and she's presided over the transition from empire to Commonwealth.
But celebrations aside, not everyone in the UK is pleased with the Queen's 63-year reign. Graham Smith, a spokesperson for Republic, a pressure group calling for the abolition of the British monarchy, explains.
Simply, we don't think that it's something to celebrate when someone is in public office for 63 years. It's normally a sign of a need for reform. People don't last in public office that long unless there's something wrong with the Constitution or something wrong with the political climate and culture, and I think in Britain's case there's something wrong with both.
So is it time to call it quits? Not if you ask the Queen. Now having become the UK's oldest reigning monarch, she's made it clear she has no plans of abdicating. Those looking to assume the throne after her will just have to wait another year.
And again with me is Jonathan Sashadoti. Jonathan.
Well, yes, absolutely. You heard
I wanted to ask you if you were celebrating today.
Prime ministers, 7 popes, 12 US presidents. I mean, this woman has seen everything as the head of state of Great Britain and is still going strong, working today as any other day of her reign.
You know, again, I will try to ruin the party here just for a second. And really, the world is dealing with so many great issues. Britain is dealing with homegrown terror. Europe is dealing with migrant crisis. The United States is dealing with the Iran deal. Really, is it like logic that we are still talking about a queen and her birthday?
Well, this hasn't been a giant celebration. The Queen's anniversary was officially celebrated a couple of years ago. But today, this was a private moment, just simply the breaking of a record of the longest-standing monarch before her. But you're quite right. There was fairly little pomp and circumstance surrounding today's anniversary, today's record-breaking moment for the Queen. She herself only mentioned it in passing in a speech that she made as part of her regular daily activities. She was opening a railway line. So as far as hard news goes, this certainly isn't it.
You know, I'm trying to imagine how long can all this monarchy thing last, and it seems that it's just there because it's just a beautiful thing that Britain has.
Well, in the national anthem, we do ask for God to save the Queen, and we pray that long may she reign over us. It seems that that's been heeded and that the Queen has reigned over us for quite some time. As a fairly stable system, which is the wrapper, let's say, for the mother of democracies, we can say that it works pretty well. The Queen has no official power as such, but of course has all the power over what is called her government, her parliament. So the Queen is a balancing power, and many have said that this Queen's power, this Queen's strength, has been in keeping things ticking over very uncontroversially, keeping her opinions to herself, and just making sure that the royal family doesn't look like it's ruling over the country, but instead looks like it is keeping things balanced and stable for years to come.
Well, I think that both of us would like to be a fly on the wall in one of the meetings that she has with her government. Jonathan Sachadoti, thank you very, very much for this. Yes, and we're going to the United States in the race for the White House. Hillary Clinton responds to more questions about the email controversy in an exclusive interview with ABC News, saying for the first time that she is sorry. Meanwhile, the leading Republican candidates are trying to reach voters with a little humor. ABC's Bazi Kanani is in Washington with the latest.
For the first time, an apology from Hillary Clinton for using a private email account for government business.
That was a mistake. I'm sorry about that. I take responsibility.
In an exclusive interview with ABC's David Muir, Clinton stressed there is no criminal investigation into her email use and said she wants to testify before Congress about it.
I did not send or receive any information that was marked classified at the time.
The Democratic frontrunner, facing possible competition from Joe Biden, said he deserves to test the waters and criticized Republican frontrunner Donald Trump for his showmanship.
Well, he won't tell you how he would do anything.
Then, an emotional moment for Clinton when talking about her late mother.
And she told me every day, you've got to get up and fight for what you believe in, no matter how hard it is. I'm going to fight for all the people like my mother, who need somebody in their corner. And they need a leader who cares about them again.
On the Republican side, a humorous exchange for Jeb Bush, appearing on Stephen Colbert's debut as host of The Late Show.
I've been using Jeb since 1994.
Yes.
It connotes excitement. It connotes...
Donald Trump also tries humor in his latest attack on Bush on Instagram.
Need some low energy?
May have an HSA in some companies don't. But I think the norm ought to be
Jeb.
Charles, this is not nice.
It's the back and forth between the Bush-Trump saga.
Yeah, we should not laugh about that. But yes, Charles Bibleser is right now here with me.
Thank you.
Yeah, he is a little bit lack of charisma, just like
a little bit. He was obviously on the first show with Colbert the other night, trying to connect with the youthful demographic. Whether it's going to work or not so sure about that.
Not so sure about that. But Hillary Clinton is in really deep trouble.
She has a big problem on her hands. You saw her finally come out and apologize after weeks of creating this aura, this sense of victimhood. So she had done nothing wrong. She didn't receive any information. The question is, why now? One of the reasons why is a slew of reports that came out over the last week. Okay, let's begin. The first one happened to say that she, on her private email server, was receiving highly classified information about North Korea's nuclear stockpile.
North
Korea's nuclear stockpile, which by definition are highly classified, even if not labeled as such, and it's the Secretary of State's job to know this.
I don't understand. You don't get these like letters and emails each and every day in your Gmail account?
Well, not North Korea, mostly Iran's nuclear program.
Yes, of course. It's just like,
Then you have her aide, a guy named Pagliano, who set up the email server, who's now pleading the Fifth and who's refusing to cooperate with the investigation.
So nobody is whispering until now. Nobody is singing nothing until
The
now.
Fifth Amendment right, by definition, is the right not to incriminate oneself. So if you're saying that you don't want to incriminate oneself, someone's got something to hide. Now the FBI may be investigating hackings of the private email server. So this is not going away. She obviously acknowledges it, henceforth the apology.
Yeah. And she's like apologizing and backing from Barack Obama. It seems not good at all.
from all sides right now.
Let's talk about the fun race, and which is with the Republicans.
The Republicans. Trump is holding steady. He continues to bash everyone left, right, and center, ruffling the feathers, so to speak. But new polls that just came out this week, the Monmouth poll, shows him steady at 30%, in line with last week's Reuters Ipsos poll, also at 30%. The guy to look out who's making a little bit of a move is Ben Carson, who's up to about 18% nationally, and who's reduced Trump's lead in Iowa at the primary level to about 7 points. Interesting. Where it'll lead, we don't know.
You know, I just Ben Carson against, let's say, versus Donald Trump. It looks, I think, better for Ben Carson, with all due respect to
Could
Donald
be, but
Trump.
still, it's a wide gap at this stage, which could shrink. What's really interesting to note, and we mentioned it very briefly on Monday, is the fact that both of these candidates out in front of the race are anti-establishment candidates. They're not politicians, so to speak. One comes from the business world, one's a neurosurgeon. So by them being so far out in front, the base is really sending a message that they've really had it with institutionalized Washington.
Wow, you know, I think that Ben Carson and Hillary Clinton going head-to-head could be very interesting.
Right.
I think it will be very much interesting than Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump with the hair thing, both of them. Charles, I didn't say that. Charles Bibleser, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Lucy.
Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu is appealing for calm after his ground forces crossed into Iraq in pursuit of Kurdish militants, and a crowd attacked the Ankara headquarters of the Turkish pro-Kurdish HDP party. Charles Bibleser has the story.
Ethnic tensions are threatening to ignite Turkey, with near-daily internal clashes putting into question the viability of snap elections scheduled for November 1st. Overnight, Turkish nationalists attacked the headquarters of the pro-Kurdish HDP political party. This amid intensifying violence between Ankara and the PKK.
186 attacks were carried out. This is definitely a planned assault that was orchestrated from one particular place. The president and his staff at the palace are the ones behind these attacks.
The latest unrest comes after PKK militants killed 15 police officers in 2 bombings in eastern Turkish provinces. Those attacks came in the wake of the killing of 16 additional soldiers on Sunday, the deadliest single incident since a 2-year-old ceasefire was shattered in July. Ankara has responded with dozens of airstrikes against PKK targets in northern Iraq, where the group has bases.
We inflicted a great amount of damage on the organization. The recent developments are a result of the ensuing panic. The losses of the PKK can be expressed in the thousands, and we are working against the structures of the group inside our borders.
As a result, the predominantly Kurdish southeast has become a tinderbox, in which more than 100 temporary military zones have been declared. The head of the HDP said it was thus becoming impossible for Turkey to hold elections. The main opposition, CHP, has already tabled a parliamentary question on how security can be guaranteed during the campaign. Kurds seemed in the driver's seat just 3 months ago, when the HDP won enough votes to enter the government for the first time, in the process ending more than a decade of single-party rule by President Tayyip Erdogan's AKP. Erdogan, who is seeking a parliamentary mandate to extend his executive powers, has said the vote will go ahead.
And for our next story, believe me, you don't want to live in the Middle East in the last few days, and not because of the war. The Middle East is still being gripped by a major dust storm, causing the death of at least 5 people and sending hundreds others to hospitals with breathing problems. Ori Shapira has more.
If you're walking in Cairo, Nicosia or Damascus these days, you may find yourself covered in a blanket of sand. But don't let the beautiful images mislead you. Experts in Israel are calling it the worst sandstorm in 75 years, with air pollution 173 times higher than average in Jerusalem, and it has already cost lives. The severe weather has caused the death of 5 people in Lebanon. Hundreds of others have been hospitalized.
I will not leave my home unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't leave the house without a mask. The only reason I'm out is to go to a doctor.
Apparently, the storm also disrupted airstrikes against Islamic State militants in Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Monday that there were fewer airstrikes in the embattled country. However, this extreme weather hasn't stopped some of the tourists who came to enjoy the last days of summer in Tel Aviv.
This is beautiful weather. This is a sandstorm, which I've never seen, and it's lovely. You don't need to see anything. You just think and imagine how beautiful it is.
It's quite hot here. I think 15 degrees more than in Germany. It's very cloudy. That was not expected. I was guessing sun is shining. Feels a bit polluted. I don't know. What is it about? Makes running hard.
Here in the Jaffa Port, there is so much dust, it's almost impossible to see the horizon. Perhaps a good metaphor for the political instability in the region. Uri Shapir, I-24 News, Tel Aviv.
Hi. Uri Dayan, professor of atmospheric science at the Hebrew University, Jerusalem, is joining me right now. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening.
Professor Dayan, please tell me that this is going to go away just in the next 4 or 5 next hour.
No, unfortunately, it's not going to happen because the winds are quite weak in the region, even though the system, the barometric system, the synoptic system that triggered this dust was in the northern part of Syria where strong winds were blowing, and therefore we had mobilization of dust there. I must say that we must realize that the Middle East is really in the crossroad of both biggest worldwide deserts, the Saharan Desert from the west and the Arabian Peninsula, Iraq and Syria from the east. So most of the dust storms usually originate from Sahara and North Africa in the winter and spring, and whereas the one coming from the east characterizes rather the fall.
Professor Dayan, what is how come it's happening now? Because a lot of changes are happening in the world in weather-wise, and should we worry about that? Because this is the biggest storm that happened here in the region in a long time, in 75 years. This is. Should we be worried?
No, I don't think, frankly, that we should relate this exceptional storm to any climate change. This storm is indeed true, really exceptional in both its timing and intensity. But such storms occur usually coming from the east as well as from the west. So it's not purely a coincidence that it's coming from the east. The big question is why it's so early. I mean, we are barely towards the end of the summer and not in the fall. But I want you to know that there are the difficulty to give you a precise answer, not for how long it will last, but rather how come such thing happen, is that I would say that there are 3 essential stages in a dust storm. It's taking off, I mean, picking up dust from ground. That's the first phase. The second would be the transport by the wind in the atmosphere. And the third is its settling deposition. Along the dimension of the particles, this dust storm is characterized by very, very fine particulate, and therefore it is remains suspended in the atmosphere for relatively a long time. And I don't believe that it's going to change dramatically before, let's say, tomorrow, before noon, I would say, something like this.
Unfortunately, you are not giving me any good news,
No,
and that means that I'm going to eat, breathe, and clean a lot of dust in the next few days.
That's true, but
Professor,
the question is really when to begin cleaning, because it's not yet done.
I'm not thinking about starting to clean even before Saturday, so it's okay. Professor.
Yes, and I must tell you that now the worst conditions are drifting toward Egypt, according to the last satellite pictures that I have seen.
Okay, so Professor Uri Dayan, thank you very, very much for this conversation with us and for the semi-good news. Thank you very much. And with me right now is Dr. Alex Cohen to give me some good news, value creation expert at the Academic College of Tel Aviv. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
Apple. What? They have money. They have lots of money. They are losing a little bit, but it's okay. You know, that's it. we can go home.
Well, the funny thing is that Steve Jobs had such charisma, and to see Tim Cook replicate his presentation style with so little charisma is really pathetic. And actually, the stock did not bulge because there was nothing dramatic about it. But
they didn't like actually put something new on the table. Like
they have a beefed up Siri. They have, I mean, I never believed in Siri, and I don't believe people want to talk to their iPhone on the subway or whatever. So, but the interesting thing is this: that we have two arenas. One is the Android arena, which is what we call red ocean. Red ocean means all the fishes are fighting, and there's a lot of blood because they compete. So you have Samsung and LG and Sony and many companies competing for price and performance, and so their profits are small. The other arena, which is what we call blue ocean, because there's no war, no competition, is the Apple arena. So almost anything they do, people who are iPhone people like myself buy Apple.
So how much money are they going to gain? Because, for example, I have iPhone 6, so I don't think that I'm going to run to buy the new product. When you're taking like the better or the upgraded same phone version, how much can you gain from it?
Well, if you have people like myself who have an iPhone 4, don't tell anybody. When I was waiting for the iPhone 6s just to humiliate you, so that I'll be able to throw my iPhone 6s on the table and show you, But actually, I actually developed a mathematical model that looks at the performance I forgot the name of the function, and calculates the optimal time when you want to renovate, to buy one. And I usually do it every 2 models, and like 4, 6, 8, whatever. Okay.
So, basically, you're saying that it's just another shtick. Can we say?
It's a tiny shtick because it's not a revolution. It's nothing dramatic. It's a tiny shtick. It's the same thing, with longer battery time. It's really minor, and a lot of that is not going to make any same,
but different.
Yes.
Dr. Alex Cohen, thank you very much for this.
Sure.
Good news, not for us, for Apple maybe, not for us. We're going out for an update from our news desk, and then we will be back for the rest of the news today. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the news today. Inhumane, horrible, disgusting. These are only few words to describe the emotions that a human being should be feeling seeing the images of a camera woman for a Hungarian nationalist TV channel as she kicks 2 refugees' children and trips up a man carrying his child at the border with Serbia. What are we seeing here exactly? A journalist that is selling his soul to the devil in order to bring the perfect scene from the heart of the action? Or these images are the proof for the rising nationalism and racism in Europe. With me to discuss this is Professor Moshe Zimmerman, Center for German History at the Hebrew University. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me. And also former Israeli ambassador to France, Ambassador Avi Pazner. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me. Professor Zimmerman, is this what we are going to see maybe in the future? In Europe, people kicking and just treating people in such a inhumane way because they are not part of their own national land?
We are seeing it already. It's not something only for the future. There is a lot of opposition in Europe and the different nations of Europe to the new refugees. But I don't know whether we can say that this is typical of the European population on the whole, because what we see mainly in Germany or in Sweden is a willingness to accept the refugees. We'll see both trends being expressed by different people in Europe. People really do not know how to relate to this new development. The foreigners are always foreigners, and for those who are inlander, of course, the foreigners are some kind of a risk some kind of a danger. They consider it to be a danger, and this is why they behave this way. But one can say, the way that the German Chancellor said it today, it's only a benefit. You have only to turn it into a benefit for the nation or for the Europeans, and this might be convincing for many people in Europe.
Let's go live to Vienna right now to our correspondent there, Mirav Savir. Mirav, at the beginning of this edition, you started telling us about the stories that the immigrants are telling about the way that people are behaving towards them. And the image that we saw today, the footage that we saw today of this camera woman is just maybe the beginning of a lot of things that we are about to hear and see happening in these lands.
Lucy, it's one of the many unknowns that we will just have to wait and see from what we've seen on the ground. And I do want to stress that we are going to places where refugees are getting a very warm welcome. So it's not a reflection of the entire society. Obviously, people who aren't as welcoming may not be at the train stations or the refugee camps helping out, such as we've seen. But for the most part, people are here. There was a refugee camp we went to last night. You could see how busy it was behind us. People giving everything that they can, from hot food to clothing to strollers, giving their time as well. People working throughout the night, not even taking a break to sleep. The people, it went from 10 people to 500. Again, this is only a fraction of society, the one that's coming out to help. We haven't been able to speak to as many people who are of the opposition view, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist, not only in Hungary, but in Austria as well, probably even Germany, and any country that has been so welcoming to these people.
You know, did you hear any of these stories, something like from one refugee or two, or the people you met telling about these horrible acts against them?
For the most part, they were telling us about horrible acts against them done by security forces or authority, putting them in these encampments that they don't want to be in, when all they did was ask for help. One man telling us they were crossing the border from Serbia into Hungary, and they got lost in the forest and asked for help, and they were brought to this open area that was more like a prison than anything else, where they couldn't go to the bathroom without asking for permission, couldn't smoke without asking for permission, were being humiliated by the police around them. Another one telling that they were put in a detention center like a jail, 9 people in a 3-meter by 3-meter cell that should only fit about 4 people standing, being pushed in there. But again, the stories that they're telling mostly reflecting what authorities have done, and specifically in Hungary, a country where they're so afraid to go. They're saying they don't want to turn back. They're afraid of going there if these quotas get pushed them back to where they just came from.
Yes, Mirav Savir, thank you very, very much for this. Ambassador Pisner, this is, I've been seeing this video since the morning, and I cannot understand how not to compare it to Nazis, to what happened in World War II, when if this starts like that, when a woman is actually hurting small children, I don't want to imagine what will happen in the future. And as Professor Zimmerman is saying, this is already happening.
Yeah, but I must say that the picture is more complex than that. It's true. This is a horrifying picture, what we are seeing. I would not compare it to the Nazi and the Holocaust, because there is a big difference, okay? Here, they are not exterminating people. They are just behaving in an extremely frustrating and bad way towards them. But there is also another aspect. I saw, for example, pictures of people in Germany and in Austria coming to the train station with balloons and flags and welcoming the refugee. I was in Europe last week or 10 days ago when the whole world saw the picture of the little Kurdish boy on a Turkish beach, okay? I saw how public opinion in Europe turned, you know, overnight, because people were against integrating migrants. They say it's not our problem. And suddenly, because of one picture of a little boy, it changed, okay?
This is the key word that you're saying, integration. Integration is maybe the factor that will maybe prevent these images from happening in the future, that Europe not only open its doors, but will also open its social life and its culture to the people who are coming, and not actually putting them in jail or putting them in small places or small neighborhoods and forgetting about them.
Well, the key is education. You have to relate to foreigners, to asylum seekers, as people who suffer and you want to help. And this is education is something that is occurring in Europe, in Germany, in Sweden, in Austria. This is, I think, the basic fact. And one thing they've learned from their history, not only the history of Nazi Germany, but the history of the 60s, is indeed that integration is another key word. You have to integrate those refugees. If you invest in integration, then of course you can integrate them into your society and accept them as new members of the civil society. For the Europeans, for the Germans mainly, whose demographic balance is really negative, this is a blessing that they have new people coming. And they know if we do now a great effort in the direction of integration, we'll achieve something that we didn't achieve in the 60s when we didn't know yet how to deal with the Turks who came as foreign workers to Germany.
Is this achievable actually with when we are seeing that Europe is going more to the right than to the left? Is this something that, you know, we can actually see as the education, the integration, when basically the parties that are going to control or controlling Europe are not pro this?
I don't think that we can speak about Europe as a whole on this matter. Professor Zimmerman mentioned Germany, which has, I would say, a mixed record of integrating Turkish immigrants. But take France, for example, who has failed, completely failed, in the last 30 or 40 years to integrate the communities coming from North Africa. Failed, and it has dire political consequences. You can see the rise of the Front National, of the extremist right. I saw some polls a few days ago. They are the #1 party in France today, the #1, okay? If there were election in France today, they would win the election, okay? So there is a danger here. There are countries who handle it better. I think Sweden handles it better, okay? You cannot speak here as Europe as one phenomena on this. I believe Germany has an interest, because of the lack of people they have, to attract immigrants and to integrate them.
But because of the history, Germany has any other choice than to act the way that it's acting right now?
Well, there's always a choice to behave like the British, for instance. They can do it, but I think after living up to the education they have got, the process of socialization in Germany since the early 50s, there is no alternative. They are an open society and they have the experience. If you look at the German society of today, you see how many foreign or people of foreign origin, what they call mit Migrationshintergrund, who were originally migrants, are a part of the German society. If you look at the national football team, for instance,
it's
three out of 11 are of Turkish origin, and they are Germans, speak fluently German, and are accepted in the German society. This is a direction they try to continue to develop.
It is even worse with the French soccer team. I think you have more Africans, more Middle East, maybe you have 1 or 2 Frenchmen left there.
Unfortunately, I don't have enough time, but gentlemen, thank you very, very much for this conversation, and let's try to see, look at something else, or to some good news from Egypt. A new transportation service in the capital city of Cairo aims to provide a safe way for women to commute by cutting out men altogether. Let's join Ayman Siksik on a ride for more details.
Need a ride? Egypt's new pink taxis are at your service. That is, if you happen to be a woman. The new transportation service in the Middle Eastern country takes its title seriously. The fleet of cars is run by women, for women, and comes to counter a pressing problem for the women of Egypt.
Innovation is created following a public need. As women in this country, we need safe transportation services for the women of Egypt, for Arab women, and for women in this country in general.
The introduction of the women-only pink taxi is seen in Egypt as a positive step towards making Egyptian women feel safer in public. For the reported 90% plus of Egyptian women who suffer sexual harassment on public transportation, the initiative is a blessing.
We offer them privacy and security, and above all, comfort. Women don't have to feel uncomfortable or worried. If they need a taxi at a late hour in the evening, they feel safe taking one with a woman driver. And aside from being safer for passengers, the company also look after us, the women drivers.
And judging by Pink Taxi's initial results, the potential customers are very excited.
I love this idea. It shows that the women of Egypt are present, that we don't need anyone to solve our problems for us. Like every new idea, the public will be opposed to it at first, but they will get used to it. I'm sure the pink taxis will be successful.
But the ability of the project to tackle this large-scale problem of sexual harassment in Egypt has been questioned from the get-go. Some critics are saying the pink taxis will encourage segregation of the sexes. Women have the right to feel safe while men are around too, they say. And the women-only taxis will not serve to curb sexual harassment. Pink taxis are currently only available in Cairo, but the managers plan to expand services across Egypt in the future. Fittingly enough, whether the project will be successful or not will eventually depend on women too.
And with me here is correspondent Ayman Siksik. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy. I'm not wearing pink,
yeah,
but
why
I support the idea
pink?
altogether.
It's a very good idea, especially after the Arab Spring and all the women were complaining there about sexual harassment, and a lot of women were experiencing even rape. This initiative coming from women, it's amazing to see.
It is amazing to see, and it's very timely. I mean, we hear reports that under President El-Sisi, sexual harassment in Egypt is getting worse, and it's being used to quash protests. We're hearing reports that the military police, when people are protesting against El-Sisi in Egypt, they're sexually assaulting women to scare them away so they don't return to protesting again. So sexual harassment is being used as a political weapon in Egypt now, not just to harass women.
And what is the reaction that is coming from the government about this?
Well, so far the government is being quiet. It's only in Cairo, so the initiative is receiving a lot of media attention both in Egypt and outside of it. Sisi does have an interest to make it seem like he's supporting this. Of course, he wants to put on a democratic face.
And it looks good outside because women are driving, unlike in Saudi Arabia where women were not allowed to drive, and it looks like it's really like...
It's great PR.
Open and liberal.
It's great PR for Egypt, but people are saying this will not solve sexual harassment, which it won't. It will keep women in a safe zone part of the day, help them get to work, to the house, to wherever they need to go, to the universities, without being sexually assaulted by men, but this won't erase sexual harassment from Egypt. Because, of course, the real problem is the place of the woman in the Arab world. If we respect women, we won't need taxis to keep them safe. And in a society where sex is taboo, the woman is always in danger.
Of course. When will this happen? When women will be actually respected and granted the rights that she needs to get in our world? God knows. Ayman Siksik, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Lucy.
And that's it for tonight. Tomorrow we will be here again from the Jaffa Port, Israel. Have a great night.